Friends, I just saw the funniest photograph of the young Mears family. Kirby is holding Chirpy the duck. They had a pet duck for a long time, and Max the dog, and what a beautiful photo. But friends, we're gathering here today, individually, each of you, and importantly, collectively, to not only witness and not only experience, but to participate in the telling of a tale. The telling of the stories, the tale of the life and times of Avogene Mears. And I have the very distinct honor of being asked on behalf of the Mears family to welcome you, each and every one of you here today, and to thank you for coming from the bottom of their heart, from the bottom of mine, and to Avogene's beloved Rice University. I am Lee Vickers, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of the Mears-Vickers situation. I'll call it. It's pretty much a brand as far as I'm concerned at this point. We had a very special thing. Herb and Avogene, and Bob and Inga, unbelievable. Avogene was in my office, actually on a telephone call with me a few years ago when things were very clear and very good, talking about her estate. And she spent a lot of time talking about, as you can imagine, Herb's pictures and so forth and so on. And she expressed her extreme love and respect for her children and trust in them to completely handle whatever needed to be handled after she was gone. So we got through the legal stuff, and she said, "Gall," you remember how she used to say Gall? She said, "Gall, you don't have to throw me a funeral when I'm gone. Everybody I know wants a big party." And I said, as I'm looking at this crowd, I see what she meant. And so Avogene will get her party. Before we do that, though, right here and right now, people, your friends, your best friends, your family members, people you know well, people who you trust, will get up here and where I'm standing, and they will tell the amazing stories that comprise at least part of the tale of the life and times of Avogene Mears. And I expect there will be laughter. Avogene was so quick to find amusement in everything, I think, and so quick. And she had that sparkle in her eye that for 60 years I recognized that she got the joke. And so, and she laughed with you, she laughed at herself, and I really loved her for that. So we're also going to hear some amazing and stirring music. We all know that Avogene had a very deep love for music. There was one genre in specific that she fell in love with, and I'm sure that other people will talk more about that after I sit down. But I happen to know she had a weak spot for Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. And the boys in the family had a weak spot for that Whipped Cream album cover as well. I just remember early times over there listening to, always hearing opera because it was on, but we'd put on other records as well, and she just had this love for music. So the selections that her children have decided to play today, I think, are some of her favorite arias. I think they're sung by some of her favorite artists and some of her and some of her favorite people. I was talking about Avogene being quick to amusement, but I have to mention her because I'll tell you, going to a movie with Herb and Avogene, a Monty Python movie, for example, with Herb and Avogene, I mean, I've never laughed so much in my entire life since then, I kid you not. And I think that if you talk to other people in my family, they will confirm with that. What a fun time that was. And Bob and Inga too. Bob and Inga loved a good movie as well. Priceless memories. Let me just say, in addition to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, Avogene had a soft spot for Andy's rock and roll band, I'm sure. But here, after all the important words are said here, and it's important, I believe, to say things out loud. It's important for people to hear them because they become real. They take on a certain truth. So this is a vitally important and I think uplifting thing, and it is the way I feel, and I hope the Mears, ultimately will feel the same way. But after the words are said, after the music is heard and everything is taken in, there will be a party, as I mentioned. So I want to make sure the Mears have graciously and generously decided to throw a big party, and everyone is invited, of course. It's going to be back down in the Mears Vickers compound, 615 Pfeiffer, not the easiest place to find. Most of you have probably been to an Easter party or something there, or other event, but there's also a map that Kirby drew that looks to me to be to scale. So that should help. Uber, they can never find the place. So best of luck to you in coming to the party, but we hope you all come. And it will start directly after we conclude the services here. And so no need to linger. I mean, when you get there, the party starts. There will be, I've got my notes here, and there will be enchiladas and margaritas, and Avogine would not have turned down either one, I'm fairly sure. I've decided to not try to tell a story. There are much better storytellers that will follow me and telling much better stories. But what I did is, with a glass of bourbon one evening, I just tried to remember the earliest memory, just flat out earliest memory. And it's not a profound memory, and it's not particularly significant. It's just a memory. And it has to do with pancakes, of all things. And the Vickers and the Mears make the best buttermilk pancakes in the world, bar none. And there's a dispute about whose recipe it is, and I think it's Julia Child's, personally. But so the kids, especially Andy and I and Kirby as well, we'd sort of, Saturday morning, and Avogine, she loved to make those pancakes for us, and I'd go over there and she used melted butter. My Lord, I thought I had gone to France or something. I mean, you pour it from up here, a big stack, and Andy knows exactly what I'm talking about. Avogine drinking her coffee, big glasses of cold milk, and I must have been 4 years old or something. And then the next day, Bob or Inga would be making the pancakes, and so Andy would come to my house. And I'm not complaining about the non-melted butter, Inga. I mean, you put a half a stick on a stack and you're good, right? I mean, that's sort of the way. And that's one of the earliest memories I have of Avogine serving us pancakes and Aunt Jemima syrup instead of log cabin. I thought, what is going on here? I don't know what it is, but I love it. So I'm sorry to bore you with that sort of story, but that was important to me, and it's something that I'll always take with me.
It's an honor for me to be here and to tell you a little from my memory of Ava Jean. Since you're here, you must have known her. So I know that you have your own memories of what a lovely, kind, and generous person she was. On September 9, the great storm of 1900 came ashore at Galveston Island. This storm was the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. And I'm standing here today in small part, according to family legend, because of that storm. My mother's father and Ava Jean's father were brothers. And to my knowledge, it's not definitive that they were actually blood brothers, because as the family legend goes, they were orphaned by the Great Storm and adopted by the McDaniel family. Additionally, my mother's mother and Ava Jean's mother were sisters. We're first double cousins, my mom would say when describing her connection to Ava Jean. My siblings and I are second cousins to Hilary, Kirby, and Andy. Now, except for the official part, Ava Jean and my mom were sisters in every sense of the word. When they were young, they lived next door to each other and at times might not have been sure which of the two houses they actually belonged in. Describing them as adults, you might oversimplify them by saying Avenel was traditional and Ava Jean was progressive. But throughout their lives, they shared a bond that strengthened and supported one another. That bond continued with them as married couples, Ava Jean and Herb, Avenel and Louis. I believe that bond, their love for each other and respect for each other, spilled over and has had a lasting effect on Hilary, Kirby, Andy, my siblings, and myself as well. Growing up, Avagene's name was almost always connected to hers, almost as though Avagene and Herb was just one name or just one entity. They were truly a perfect match for each other. As I mentioned earlier, my mom was pretty traditional. We were a meat and potatoes kind of family. Additionally, I was a notoriously picky eater. And to this day, there are a few things that remain on the untouchable list. I was in my mid-40s when I first experienced cilantro. I'm sure I had eaten things with cilantro prior to that, but there was a moment when I realized that adding a little cilantro to something enhanced the flavor significantly. As I reflected in preparation for today, it struck me. Avagene and Herb, no pun intended, were cilantro. That's something different from what I was familiar with that really enhanced the flavor of my life and the lives of my family. Now, many of my memories from childhood, especially early childhood, are confusing. That's because most of the actual events I don't remember. But I have these great memories of the home movies my parents took. So thanks to the cutting-edge technology of the 8mm camera, my earliest memory of Avagene is actually from before I was born. When I close my eyes to remember, I can hear the movie projector whirling and clattering, and I can see Hilary and my older brother Wade, just toddlers, crawling on the floor or trying to pull up and take their first shaky steps. Back then, using a movie camera was a lot more difficult and complicated than today, especially if you were filming indoors. The camera itself was simple enough, but to get enough light for an indoor shot, you had to mount it on a light bar the size of a set of moose antlers. The intensity of the light produced was so great that in a pinch you could use it as a food warmer or make toast. The standard reaction of anyone who fell under its glare was to duck and cover. But as the camera panned the room, all you can see are people with their hands shielding their eyes, squinting their faces. But then, there is a 20-something Avagene standing in the doorway to the kitchen, and with a smile and a flourish, she does a little dance. On September 24th, 2005, another hurricane, this one named Rita, came ashore near the Texas-Louisiana border. Prior to making landfall, Rita was a Category 5 storm with images of Katrina very fresh in our minds. It was a source of great anxiety for people in the Houston area. Against advice to the contrary, Avagene loaded up her car with as many of her prized possessions as she could carry, plus her very old dog, and along with about 1 million other people, headed west to avoid the pending destruction. Although her original destination was Austin, she ended up taking refuge at our home in Columbus, a drive that under normal circumstances only takes about an hour, lasted 13 hours. Now, if you knew Avagene at all, you know she loved animals. I don't remember the dog's name, but Stinky would have been a good one. How she survived 13 hours in a car with the windows rolled up with that dog is the most amazing part of the story. Almost any time of the year, the Mears would be hosting someone from the art or music community visiting from out of town or Europe or some other distant place on the globe. Their home was always a warm and welcoming place, and perhaps many of you have attended one of the Mears Easter parties. I don't know the origin of the party, but it was always a highlight for me when I was growing up. I was so proud of myself one year when I won the scavenger hunt. And I can still see Avagine directing the dress-up relay with all those hats and scarves and high-heeled shoes. I remember that the people there were so interesting, colorful, and diverse. So inspired by that memory, 4 years ago, we made an attempt to revive the spirit of that party with an Easter party at our home in Columbus. This past year, Hilary, Kirby, and Avagine were able to attend. And I was so proud to introduce her to our guests as the inspiration for our party. There's a Carrie Newcomer song titled "The Gathering of Spirits." The last line in the chorus are, "Life's a twinkling, that's for certain, but it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, there's a fellowship of friends, and we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again." Those words paint a beautiful mental picture of what I experienced as a young person all the way through to today whenever I was with Avagine. And Avagine, I look forward to taking up where we left off when we all meet again.
Within hours of the time that the family posted the sad news about Avagine on Facebook, there were dozens of responses from people all over the world, all of them heartfelt, from her friends that she knew in every walk of life. After a day or two, there were literally hundreds of these messages from all over the world, and every one of them was filled with glowing praise for Avagine. And I was struck by how similar some of the comments were, but also how eloquent all of the Facebook friends that she had were. Some of them bear repeating. "The biggest heart in Houston, if not all opera," one respondent said. "A loving, generous, kind human being filled with laughter, compassion, and care for her friends. She defined the spirit of warmth and inclusion, the center force of all that was great, good, and honorable about Houston and HGO. A beautiful soul, a dear lady who had no reason to visit with me and make me smile, but she did. Filled with life, laughter, goodness, and light. Lovely, gracious, kind, thoughtful, and most important, fun. The best of the best." Well, every one of these views of Avagine is right on the mark, but taken all together, they still don't do justice to the friend that we all remember with tremendous love and admiration. She numbered among her friends world-famous opera singers, composers, directors, conductors, designers, impresarios, notable artists, intellectuals, as well as a few ordinary people and a host of opera philistines like me. That Avagine took to heart the old adage, if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all. Now, saying nothing at all was never an option for Avagine. So she made sure she had wonderful, inspiring, and sometimes hilarious things to say about everybody. My wife Ginger and I had the great good fortune to be with Avagine and Herb among a small group of friends who called themselves the Texas Travelers. We made an annual pilgrimage to some place in Texas, although once we ventured with Herb and Avagine as far as Bermuda. The memories of Avagine's always joyful presence on these trips will be with us always. Our days were filled with treks through museums, walks on beaches and through forests, excursions on motorboats and ferries and antique trains, and observations of all kinds of very interesting creatures. We saw the dolphins in Bermuda, we saw the whooping cranes in Rockport, we saw sea turtles at South Padre Island, the little miniature horses in Brenham, alligators in Caddo Lake up near Jefferson, sharks in the aquarium at Corpus Christi, and in Fredericksburg on a ranch that somehow Herb and Abogine had discovered, we saw a whole herd of exotic antelopes called oryxes. And after such a day, which was usually either in the broiling sun or in the pouring rain, our group always was eager to get back to our air-conditioned motel, a glass of wine and a hearty dinner. But first, we had to round up Abogine. Inevitably, she had wandered off to the nearest souvenir shop to stock up on a variety of tchotchkes, little carved wooden animals or earrings from native stones, decorative plates, jars of preserves, enormous colorful baskets, whatever the local vendors might have on offer. Once, on an excursion across the Rio Grande from Brownsville to Matamoros, back in the golden era when you could cross the border without any difficulty and come back, we wandered into an open-air Mexican market, and Abogine was enchanted by an array of colorful baskets, some of them as large as laundry hampers. But she had to have the biggest one, and she persuaded my wife Ginger and our friends Dorothy Hackney and Betty Ewing and Kate Rodwell to get one too. And I tried to protest. I said, Abogine, we don't have room for them in the car. We were traveling at that time 5 people in a little sedan to get down there. But Abogine prevailed, and everybody got a basket. And the next day, on the 7-hour drive back to Houston, Abogine and 2 others sat in the back seat, clutching the baskets on their laps, and completely were obscured for the entire trip from everybody in the front seat. Abogine always had an elaborate and hilarious story that she could entertain people with for hours. Once was how she dealt with a deadly South American snake that wound up in a costume basket that had been shipped to the opera from the Teatro Colón. Then there was an elaborate tale of her hitchhiking as a student through Norway, although she knew no Norwegian. And one other occasion, she surprised one of our travelers who happened to be a Catholic priest by telling him about the tales of a colleague of his who was also a priest whom she dated when she was in college. And on a trip to Wimberley, Abogine had our group convulsed in laughter with some complicated tale as we were leaving a country store, and we lingered for a few moments on the front steps still laughing, and at last the store's owner came out to us, and I thought he was going to say, please get out of here, you're bothering people, leave. But he said, would you all come back tomorrow and do this again? I think you will draw customers with all that laughter. These wonderful memories of Abogine are reinforced for us by a collection of quirky memorabilia that she would give us over the years on various occasions. There's a Christmas tree ornament of a dancing cow with a clothesline holding a lot of Christmas stockings on it. There's a pair of sequined party hats, a cassette tape of 1930s piano music. There's a big green bug-eyed stuffed frog. There's a petrified hen's egg, and oh yes, a big Mexican basket. Abogine's wonderful spirit calls to mind the words of that wonderful founding father, the Venerable Benjamin Franklin, which he sent to a relative on the loss of a loved one. Franklin wrote, I condole with you, we have lost a most dear and valuable relation. Our friend and we are invited abroad on a party of pleasure that is to last forever. Her chair was first ready, and she is gone before us. We could not all conveniently start together. And why should you and I be grieved at this, since we are soon to follow, and we know where to find her? But you know, I'll bet we won't find Abogine sitting at her chair at the party table. She will be up putting glitter on the party hats, and adding extra cheese to the enchiladas, and making sure everyone's glass is full of margaritas. And when it's our turn to join her, it should be a lot of fun.
As most all of you know, Avogine was my very best friend forever. I first met her when I was 8.5 months pregnant with my first child in September of 1955. So what is that? 63 years? And, you know, we were so close for all that time. It was hard to lose her, I'll tell you. Thanks. I was afraid to touch it because they told me not to touch it. My husband Bob and I bought the house across the street from Herb and Avogine, and I just want to say, oh my goodness, pay attention to those little details in your life. Because what if we had not bought that house and we bought another house and had never met the Mears? I mean, I just can't imagine. Anyway, we lucked out. We became fast friends right away. We loved and hated the same books, movies, politicians. And our husbands became fast friends right away too. They shared a lot of interests, mainly building projects and ping pong tournaments. So we had a lot of fun together. We had many good times with the kids, going to the beach, camping, water skiing, and then we had super times at parties without the kids. We babysat their kids, and they babysat ours. And when I told my children that Bob and I'd be going out of town and they'd be staying with Herb and Avogine, they'd race to their rooms, pack suitcase, ready to go, not a sad moment. And that is such a gift. And I think the Mears kids felt the same way. They were happy enough to stay with us, weren't you? We had a very unusual relationship and had, dinners together and we just did everything together, and it was just like one big family, which is very unusual, and we're still very, very close, all of us. There's so many stories to be told along the way you can imagine. I know one time when the kids were still very young, they were playing in front of her house, and she came out and saw that they were tormenting a spider under a jar. She went into a passionate rant about the spider, probably being a mother with babies, waiting for her to bring home food for dinner, and that they were being cruel to a living creature that was doing them no harm. And she went on and on and on. And then she released the spider, and as she stood up, the nanny for one of the neighbor kids that had been in this group of kids had been standing by, and she said, "Mrs. Mears, was that your spider?" And Avogine was such a great cook. Even before she took cordon bleu cooking lessons during the year they spent in France. And Kirby and Lee, Avogine's son Kirby and my son Lee, were best buddies, and the two of them would ask each of us what was for dinner so they could decide which one sounded better, and then ask if either Kirby could have dinner with us or if Lee could have dinner with them. And I've got to admit, mostly they dined at the Mears. Avogine was smart, fun, and generous, adventurous, and just an all-around wonderful person. But she was so modest. She claimed to be just average. I always thought I was the smartest person in the room until I met Avogine. She was brilliant, but she never would believe it, even though I told her all the time how smart she was. She was an excellent writer as well as a very talented photographer. She had an eye, and yet she never considered herself a professional. And even when she was a publicity director for the Houston Opera, she thought she was sort of in that job on an interim basis until they could find somebody better to do the job. Right, I hear the laughter from the back of the room, because I never saw as much publicity or as cleverly done as I did when she had, for the opera, as I did when she had that job. She had a long life, rich, filled with loving family and friends, lots of travel, tons of good times. And the only bad part of living so long is that you outlive so many loved ones, which she did. We'll all miss her a lot, I know. Thank you.
What a gift it is in life when you find someone with whom you can laugh. And I'm not talking polite titters or even hearty guffaws. I'm talking about convulsive, seismic, uncontrollable laughter that makes you gasp for breath and makes tears roll down your cheeks. And that was Abogine for me. She hired me at Houston Grand Opera in 1986, and through all the time that we worked together and beyond, we delighted in being able to make one another laugh till it hurt. And so Kirby and Hilary and Andy have asked me to share some of those stories with you today, and so I'm going to do that, having winnowed them down to ones that I could tell in church without being struck by lightning. Abogine loved Monty Python. Her favorite Monty Python sketch was one in which the scenario was that Pythons were two teams of school children competing in a quiz show. And John Cleese was the moderator. And the kids would be struggling to come up with these answers to these very difficult questions. And in every case, John Cleese would say, "No, I'm sorry, the answer is pork." So we're in the offices in the Wortham Center, and Abogine, of course, had the director's office in the interior, and I was in the exterior. And oftentimes we would yell back and forth, as one does. We couldn't see each other, but we would talk back and forth. And, once in a while I would ask a question, and every once in a while the answer would come back, pork. The answer is pork. On one occasion I was writing a letter to the famed Village Voice critic, Leighton Kerner. And I just met him and had met his wife. And so I'm handwriting this letter and I'm trying to personalize it. So I'm saying something like, I don't know, "So good to see you," and I blanked. I could not remember her name. Struggled and struggled, could not remember her name, flipped through my Rolodex, nothing. So I yelled out to Abogine, "Abogine, what's Leighton Kerner's wife's name?" The answer came back, "Frito Cordelia." Do I need to even add that that was not her name? It continued even when she moved up to the archives. In fact, it was even better up there. She was dubbing a video of the Robert Wilson Parsifal. Yeah, right? For those of you that didn't see it, in Robert Wilson's productions, very little happens. People go for long stretches at a time, not really moving. So she had the sound off. And Jim Caldwell, our photographer, comes in at one point, and he's talking to Abogine, and he's looking over, and he's looking over again. He said, "Abogine, I think your tape is stuck." Yeah. So we had a good laugh over that. Another instance in the archives, she had gotten hold, this is before YouTube and the internet and all these things, she had gotten hold of a videotape. And one after another of us would come up, and there were like 4 or 5 of us gathered up there, and she kept playing this tape. It was a compilation tape of clips of the Dallas-based televangelist Robert Tilton. If you've ever seen Robert Tilton, he's known for these moments of inspiration in which he squints his eyes and kind of goes like that. Someone had pieced together all of these moments from him and had added sound effects. You can find this today on YouTube. Just click search and type in farting preacher. I went back to my office that day with a splitting headache from laughing so hard for so long, as did she. There was a story that Avogine loved to tell herself, and it was when she was first named Director of Public Relations for Houston Grand Opera. And she was elevated to this position. She didn't have any experience in PR, but she had, incredible instincts and a sharp intellect. But here she is, the new Director of PR of Houston Grand Opera. In comes Houston Grand Opera's national press rep, Cynthia. Cynthia, if you know New York publicists, you can kind of imagine Cynthia was a hard-bitten, late middle-aged New Yorker. Picture somebody with a cigarette in one hand and a highball on the other, you've pretty much got Cynthia. And Cynthia comes in and says to Avogine, "Can I see your press list?" And Avogine said, "What's a press list?" And Cynthia according to Avogine, turns to David Gockley and says, "Fire her." But I tell that story because it illustrates what an extraordinary time in Houston Grand Opera's history that really was. Here was a company that David Gockley took as a small regional company and transformed it into a major player in international opera. But without Avogine, no one would have known, because Avogine was with him every step of the way, telling that story in the national and international media. Later, she founded and created Houston Grand Opera's archives because she saw a need. HGO didn't have one before Avogine. So she ensured that the company's history would never be lost, and that Houston Grand Opera will always remember where it came from, and that the company will never forget its roots, and it will never forget the extraordinary people upon whose contributions the HGO we know today is built. Avogine was the best at what we do in public relations and communications. She was the best. Her hallmarks were a genuine love of the art. Nobody who knew Avogine could doubt that she deeply loved opera. Tied to that is a genuine love and respect for the artists that create that art. As many people have already said today, some of her best friends were major international singers, not because they were international singers, because she knew them from when they were in the Houston Grand Opera studio and nobody knew who they were, and they had these lifelong bonds. She also had a genuine love and respect for journalists. Some of her best friends were journalists. She was a good friend with Carl Cunningham. She knew Charles Ward well. Ann Holmes was one of her best friends. And then, over and above all of these things, I think sometimes she doesn't get as much credit as she should for expertise. She not only loved opera, she was an authority. She knew opera. She told the story once of how she got lost in Rome once, and she didn't speak Italian at all. But she knew opera. So she walked up to an Italian policeman and remembered Puccini's Manon Lescaut and went, "Sola, perduta, abbandonata." And got the help she needed. So, I am now about to turn the age that Avogine was when she hired me. And I now find myself in the privileged position of being able to influence young people as they come up. And I hope and pray that I can do half as good a job as she did in launching careers as she launched mine. And I can vow to Andy, Hilary, and Kirby that as I do so, I will give credit where it is due, and I will invoke her name often.
So I would like to tell you 10 things that I love about my mom. I'm an accountant, so I have 10. Bear with me. I easily could have more, but you probably want to get home by midnight. So I'm going to keep it to 10. Number 1, I've been thinking for years now that if I could get the guts to speak at Mom's service, whenever that would be, I knew that I would open with this story. Mom went in for an MRI. The technician had to stop the procedure, the test, because Mom was laughing so hard she was ruining the results. I mean, who else does that? Only Mom. Number 2, my mom was so enthusiastic. When she liked something, she really liked it. She quickly became a groupie of an author, a singer, a director, whoever or whatever. When she heard the mariachis at our dinner in Austin, she had to have that CD. My guess is she's the only one who even asked if they had produced one. When she went out to Santa Fe with her friend, Sammy Jekyll, she loved the pinyon incense that they were burning, that they burned there, and she liked it so much that she brought home boxes to have it, to burn it back at Piper. So for weeks, our house just reeked of burning pinyon, a la Santa Fe. Number 3, I love that my mom was so interested in everything. Well, this sort of goes along with the whole enthusiasm thing. She loved gardening, trees, history, sewing, silver patterns, politics, birds, snakes, plumeria. If she didn't already know about it, she'd make it a point to learn. Well, all except for accounting. She left that up to me. And also how to use a cell phone. As she said, technology is not my friend. Number 4, Mom was such a positive person. She would exclaim, "This is the best toast. This is the best coffee. This is the best soup, the best book," whatever I've ever read, eaten, met, etc. Over-the-top enthusiasm was par for her course. Those of you who spent time with her know what I'm talking about. You were the very best to her. Number 5, Mom was so incredibly gregarious. She loved people, parties, friends, good times. She enjoyed meeting people and seemed to know everyone. Once we were at an event in downtown Houston. This very flamboyant, tall, cross-dressing guy, screamed from across the crowded room, "Abigine!" Yep, she knew him. Another time, another guy called out from across the lobby of the Wortham, "Abigine!" Yep, Placido Domingo was on a first name basis with him. Number 6. I love that Mom did not shy away from a challenge or adventure. Of course, her biggest adventure was marrying Dad after their 6-week courtship. He proposed on the first date. Dad had just returned from Paris, a bohemian artist with no money, who didn't even know how to drive a car. He did own a small collection of books in French, which I think was pretty impressive to Mom, She agreed to marry him because she knew life with Dad would be an adventure, and it was. While in France, despite her limited French, it was limited, trust me, she took a sewing class, created her own patterns, and also took a cooking class. When her teacher suggested her pâte croûte had gone all wrong and that she needed to dispose of it in the toilet down the hall, she never expected that upon pulling the lever, that instead of going down, it actually came up and ended up just covering her, the walls, the ceiling. She loved telling that story of her adventure in learning the art of French cooking. While at Rice, Mom went out for the Elizabeth Baldwin Literary Society basketball team. Picture that. Picture that. Picture that. Yeah. The first time she told me that, I could hardly believe it. I laughed and laughed and laughed. It was incredible. Mom and Inga Vickers volunteered as prop girls for Theater Incorporated when we were kids. I don't know how they did it with all their household responsibilities, but they did. Mom, the ever-enthusiastic fan, would then play the soundtrack for the current production non-stop. The Music Man, West Side Story, Once Upon a Mattress, Bye Bye Birdie. Those were the soundtracks of our happy childhood. Number 7, Mom and Dad taught me that anyone, really everyone, has something to teach you. You may not realize it right away, but if you show some interest and listen, you'll be surprised and amazed to learn something you never would have guessed you would from that person. And so often I have been so amazed. Number 8, Mom always said, I'm not doing anything I don't want to do. She volunteered as my Girl Scout leader. My fellow scouts might remember her staying up all night heating bricks in the campfire, which she covered and then used to keep our feet warm, or keep them from freezing. She was not going to lose a scout on her watch. Mom took care of her goddaughter, Sophie, born profoundly deaf, every Saturday so that her mother, Mary McKendry, a ballerina with the Houston Ballet, could have a morning of rest. Mom never canceled, even though she had worked umpteen hours the week before at HGO. When Sophie's brother was born, she cared for him as well. Number 9, I love that Mom was so much fun. When A Hard Day's Night came out, Mom and Dad went to see it 8 times. There was no generation gap. When friends talked about rebelling against their parents, not me. There's nothing to rebel against. So I've saved the best for last. Number 10. The thing that I love the most is that she was mine. My mother. What a treat, a joy, a pleasure, an adventure. So much love. I'm so very grateful that she was mine.
I think Placido Domingo his name has come up a couple of times, and it reminds me of when I pointed out a photograph of Mom with Placido Domingo, and she said, this is one of the very rare photographs of a woman leaning away from Placido Domingo. You'll see this photograph. It's in the loop, I think, if you come to the party. First, I'd like to say what a great source of comfort it has been to hear from Mom's many opera friends and co-workers. She enjoyed her work at the opera so much that she once mentioned to David Gockley that he didn't have to pay her, that she worked for free, the thought of which made Dad cringe. No. The opera brought such joy to her life. I'd like to thank my dear godmother, Sarah Peterson, and the Texas Travelers, Carl Cunningham, Jim and Ginger Bernhard, and Dorothy Hackney for giving Mom years of travel adventures after Dad's passing. Thanks also to Zihin Kayag for the gourmet dishes she prepared and for being Mom's walking companion on Pfeiffer Road. Mom loved to travel. She was curious about other people and cultures. I think she saw the performing arts, the intense storytelling set to music, as a way of traveling in place. Mom liked being in the middle of the action. A Contemporary Arts Association opening, a Houston Grand Opera premiere, an Easter party, an Oscars watching party. They were not always lavish events. Some I didn't even know about until the night of. In my first year at Rice, I once called home late at night to hear Mom in the background saying, "Tell him to come home if he wants dinner." 20 minutes later, I'd be sitting next to cast members of an opera that had just had its last curtain call, everyone in full party mode. For Mom and Dad's Oscar night parties, it was potluck. The idea was to name your dish after a movie that was up for an Oscar. In 1987, one couple arrived with a dish they named Piggy Souvlaki Got Marinated. That was for Peggy Sue Got Married, which narrowly beat out the tuna casserole simply called Platuna. Mom was inspired by her own mother, who crossed the Atlantic as the only passenger on a Yugoslav freighter to come visit us in France. The crossing ended up taking 42 days. Our only notice that Grandma was running late was a telegram that said, "Slight delay, engine problems." Mom's own curiosity took her to Europe before she met Dad. She had already studied in Oslo and had hitchhiked through Europe with friends. When Dad proposed on their first date, she said, "You're crazy," and then tried to reason that she just wanted to go back to Europe. But 6 weeks later, Dad, the pest who wouldn't leave Mom alone, prevailed and made it official. Mom would return to Oslo almost 15 years later, this time with Dad and the three of us in tow, on a trip that would take us to Antibes, France, where David Addix had so generously offered his apartment. We had the top floor with 3 windows that looked out over 17th century ramparts to the port beyond. Out of the 5 of us, only Dad spoke French. Hilary and Andy and I scrambled to learn enough words to survive our first day of French public school when Mom and Dad thought it perfectly normal to just drop us off. The year we spent in France was life-changing. Mom's cooking instructor in Nice gave me my first cookbook in French that I still have. Many years later, in March of 2003, Mom's travel bug showed no signs of slowing down. She wrote me in an email, "Another place I've always wanted to go is down the canal, the Brente Riviera, west of Venice, where all the Palladian houses are. And I have a friend who has a restored farmhouse 30 minutes by train west of Venice, up in the mountains. We could drop by the Fords in London, the Romaines in Paris. I've always wanted to swim the Hellespont to Constantinople, but may have missed my chance. Shucks." Mom and I did visit the Romaines in Paris, then to Antibes, and days later hopped a train to Refrontolo, Italy. Max and Delaine Loppert lived at the top of a steep hill in a beautifully restored farmhouse surrounded by fruit trees they had planted. For 4 days, we talked opera, architecture, and politics, but mostly opera, about singers, directors, musicians, curtains getting stuck, singers getting called at the last minute to fill in, favorite performances, and these stories were shared over multi-course meals Max and Delaine prepared, served on ceramic dishes Max had made. The lunches easily ran 2.5 hours, followed by naps and dinners that extended into the night with fruit liqueur tastings, liqueurs made from the fruit off the trees in their garden. It was paradise for Mom. One of the happiest moments I can remember. One of Mom's dear friends, Rosemary McLaughlin in Minnesota, said she considered Mom's life a work of art. Sweet thought. We'll miss you, Mom.
Wasn't too long ago, I went to my 40th high school year reunion, and I hadn't seen some of these people in 40 years. And they all asked about how my mom was. She liked spreading joy, and she didn't do it on purpose or conscientiously. She was just kind of an optimistic, happy person. And she knew how to make me happy. She'd lean over and say something like, "Boy, you're good company." Or she'd say, I love you more than you love me. She made me feel happy. She was also, she knew me all too well, and mothers know best, of course. And she wrote me when I was in college, and she said, expect something of yourself. Expect something from your friends. Don't hang around with losers, it rubs off. Being trustworthy, of good character, capable of love and being loved is a lot more important, but thank God we don't have to make a choice. She also knew I could do more and do better, and she wrote, be willing to work for the present to achieve something worthwhile in the future. And she believed in me. She'd say, you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. She was always very supportive. And she wanted me to do the right thing always. But occasionally she'd let me slip up. And she even let my friends draw all over my wall in my bedroom. And she signed it too. Honesty, do what you say you're going to do, be kind to others, treat everyone with respect, and be grateful. She taught me the most important things in life. Some of my favorite memories was when I'd come home after a dirt clod war. She'd hose me down with the garden hose, or she was an incredible seamstress. She'd sew my Halloween costumes, and she was a great cook, and she always liked to have centerpieces. I remember the centerpieces, she'd always have to say, here's some flowers or something. And she had those centerpieces where you wind up the toys, and there was a big nose that you wind up, and the nose would help on. She'd water the garden with a gin and tonic in her hand, and she'd say, I live in paradise. She loved her home. And I also remember when she'd show up at Memorial High School events wearing the red and white and a big smile. She was well read. She read Tony Hillerman and Dick Francis and Ralph Martin, and the list goes on. And she owned every cookbook that was ever published. And when she'd get her picture taken, she'd go like this. Y'all see that in the loop when you come out to the party later. Dad loved Mom immensely, and Mom loved Dad, and Mom was a great wife, and he'd leave these big posters on the back wall, written in French. So when she came home late from the opera, professing his love, it's just remarkable. And I remember they used to love to dance to music in the kitchen. To Enrico Macias or Petula Clark, and they'd be jumping up and down, and they'd get the big stinky dog jumping up and down with them too, and they'd be loud. Oh my gosh. No inhibitions, only having fun, living life as it should be lived, showing us that life is wonderful and should be enjoyed. And Dad made a silkscreen of a couple dancing and titled it, To Live is to Dance. And I'm sure that was inspired by all the dancing he did with Mom. She had a great sense of humor, and she'd tell jokes all the time, and we'd laugh, and some of those were pretty risque. Those were the ones she heard at the opera office. And I got to go see so many fantastic operas growing up. I just had the most marvelous childhood. And a lot of times I'd get to go backstage, and Mom would have a Nikon 35 millimeter camera, and she'd be snapping publicity pictures. And it was fantastic to see all these wonderful performers who were so dedicated, just like Mom. Mom was filled with gratitude. In tough times, she'd make the most of it, and she was always positive and empathetic. Her glass was more than half full. And she would say to me, this is the day the Lord hath made. This is the day the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Well, today I'm here to rejoice and be glad to remember Abba-Jean. And she made the world a better place. In her last days, when she was experiencing dementia, she could still remember Bible verses and prayers and hymns. Avenel Mattingly and my mother taught Sunday school at the Christian Science Church just right down here on Montrose. And we'd say the Lord's Prayer at bedtime, and we'd bring glory to God in Jesus' name. I believe when she passed, she was resolved that she had lived a life that it should have been lived, and she was content, no regrets, no shame, no demons. She told no lies. She had a pure heart, mind, and soul, and she had accomplished what she set out to do. And she loved her family, and she loved her friends. She loved you guys. She told Hilary and Kirby and me on several occasions, when I die, I want you to put on my tombstone, here lies a girl that had too much fun. We haven't really decided what we're going to do. We did find a folder with some of the notes Mom made and about what to do when she passed. And she did say that they own a plot in Chapel Hill. And she said that she wanted everyone to come see the bluebonnets when they come visit her in the spring. God bless you all. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for the speakers. And Lee, you want to wrap us up? And see you out at 6:15 Piper. We love you. Love you, Mom. I miss you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we just heard stories about everybody's favorite person in the world, if I'm not mistaken. That was awesome. I think you just heard a lot of truth being spoken, and it's not often you can say that. I also get the sense that there are a lot more stories out there. I kind of have this is the kind of deal where if people were coming up, we could probably go all night. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to remind you to please come to the party at Piper Road if you can. It's going to be a lot of fun, and there we can continue such warm feelings that I believe we've all experienced and that we're feeling now. And thank you so much again for the Mears family, from the bottom of their hearts for coming today. It means the world to them. Thank you.